The morning sun filtered through half-drawn curtains, spilling a pale gold hue across the marble floors of the apartment in central Valoria. The city was waking up. Buses hissed along slick streets, commuters in tailored suits hurried to their offices, and life hummed with the rhythm of ambition. Inside, however, the air was tense, almost brittle. Clara Benson stood by the kitchen counter, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. The steam curled into the air, carrying the faint aroma of roasted beans, but it brought her no comfort. Her reflection shimmered faintly against the chrome refrigerator. Tired eyes, unbrushed hair, and the soft outline of a woman who had lost herself somewhere between marriage and survival. The hiss of the toaster snapped her out of her thoughts just as a deep, annoyed voice echoed down the hallway. "Clara, did you iron my shirt, or are you still doing nothing like every other day?" It was Daniel Benson, her husband of 8 years, a senior project manager at Nova Dynamics Corporation, one of Valoria's largest logistics firms. Once he had been charming, funny, and ambitious. Now he was sharp-edged and perpetually irritated, his words dripping with disdain more often than affection. Clara exhaled slowly. "It's in the laundry room, Dan. I left it hanging by there." Her voice faltered as he strode into the kitchen. His expression was already twisted in irritation. The tall man she once admired now looked at her as though she were a burden he couldn't shake off. "You left it hanging," he repeated mockingly. "Of course you did." Typical Clara. Half effort, no results. She bit her lip, forcing her tone to remain calm. "I've been up since 5 finishing that proposal draft you asked me to help with last night. You said you needed another pair of eyes on it." He snorted. "Yeah, and I ended up fixing all your mistakes anyway. You're not exactly office material, are you?" Something inside Clara twisted, but she said nothing. Silence had become her armor. He grabbed a slice of toast and glanced at her with a cold smirk. "You know what? I don't even know why I bother anymore. I go to work 12 hours a day while you sit here playing house. You've gained weight, you complain about being tired, and for what? You don't bring in a dime." The words hit like shards of glass. "I'm not going to support a fat, lazy woman like you for the rest of my life." He spat, each syllable sharp and deliberate. For a moment the world went still. Clara's hand trembled around her coffee cup. She had always known he could be cruel, but this was different. Something final had cracked between them. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "You don't have to, Daniel." He blinked, taken aback by her calmness. "What's that supposed to mean?" Clara set down her mug, her movements deliberate. "It means you don't have to support me anymore. I'll manage just fine on my own." He gave a short, mocking laugh. "With what? Your little freelance writing that barely covers groceries?" She didn't answer. Daniel shook his head, snatched his briefcase, and muttered something under his breath before slamming the door behind him. The apartment fell silent again. Clara sank into one of the dining chairs, her mind whirling. The humiliation burned deep, but beneath it, something fierce began to stir, a spark she hadn't felt in years. That same morning her phone buzzed. It was a message from Richard Lang, her late uncle's attorney. "Good morning, Clara. Please come to my office at noon. It concerns the reading of your uncle's will." Her breath caught. She hadn't seen her uncle, Edward Lang, in almost 6 years. He had been a reclusive but kind man, the founder of Langford Holdings, a respected investment firm in Valoria. He'd loved her like a daughter when her parents passed away, but their lives had drifted apart after she married Daniel. By noon, Clara stood in the sleek glass lobby of Lang & Associates, her heart pounding as she was ushered into a polished meeting room. Richard, a composed man in his 60s, greeted her with a solemn smile. "Clara, thank you for coming on such short notice," he began. "I'll get straight to the point. Your uncle left a very detailed will, and you, my dear, are the primary beneficiary." She blinked, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "Beneficiary? What does that mean exactly?" Richard smiled faintly and slid a thick envelope across the table. "Your uncle left you his estate, including all financial holdings and property shares. That totals approximately $7.5 million. For a long moment, Clara couldn't speak. The words didn't seem real. $7.5 million, she finally whispered. He nodded. That's correct. And there's one more thing. Your uncle also left you controlling interest in Langford Holdings. As of today, you are the majority shareholder and owner. Her breath hitched. The same company that, only weeks ago, had finalized a merger deal with Nova Dynamics Corporation. Daniel's company. She could almost hear Daniel's arrogant voice from that morning echoing in her mind. I'm not going to support a fat, lazy woman like you. Clara felt something shift inside her. The humiliation she'd endured transformed into a cold, steady resolve. Mr. Lang, she said quietly, when can I assume my position? As soon as you wish, he replied, studying her with new respect. By the time Clara left the office, Valoria's skyline shimmered under the afternoon sun. The glass towers reflected endless possibilities, and for the first time in years, she walked with her head held high. She wasn't the weak woman Daniel had mocked anymore. She was the owner of the company that had just swallowed his. And soon he would find out. As she rode the elevator down to the street, Clara allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Let's see how you handle being the one supported, Daniel, she murmured to herself. Outside, the traffic roared, but all she could hear was the steady beat of her own heart. The story of Clara Benson had just begun. 2 weeks later, the sky above Valoria was a restless gray, clouds rolling in over the glass towers like an omen of change. Inside the 37th floor of Langford Holdings, the boardroom buzzed with murmurs of uncertainty. Executives sat around a long, polished table, their eyes flicking between the empty seat at the head and the crisp folder marked Ownership Transition. Clara Benson stood outside the glass doors, adjusting her blazer. She'd spent the last week in quiet preparation, meeting with Richard Lang, learning about the company's operations, and making herself familiar with every detail of the recent merger with Nova Dynamics Corporation. It was strange how confidence could return so swiftly once humiliation was stripped away. She wasn't the same woman who had been belittled in her own kitchen. She had something Daniel could never take from her: control. Mrs. Benson, a young assistant called softly. They're ready for you. She inhaled deeply, squared her shoulders, and stepped into the room. All conversation stopped. The executives, mostly older men in tailored suits, looked at her with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. They had been expecting a seasoned investor, not a quiet woman in her early 30s with a calm gaze and an air of determination. Richard Lang stood at her side, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, this is Mrs. Clara Benson, the new majority shareholder and owner of Langford Holdings. Gasps rippled through the room. Clara gave a polite nod, her voice steady. Good morning, everyone. I know this comes as a surprise, but I assure you, I intend to continue my uncle's vision. I'll be working closely with all of you to ensure a smooth transition. One of the senior board members, Mr. Harlan, leaned forward. Mrs. Benson, forgive my frankness, but do you have any prior corporate management experience? A faint smile touched her lips. No, she admitted, but I do have something equally valuable: insight, humility, and the willingness to learn quickly. I've also spent the last 2 weeks reviewing every major contract and merger document, including the one with Nova Dynamics Corporation. At the mention of Nova Dynamics, the room seemed to tighten. Everyone knew about that merger. It had been one of the biggest deals of the year, and rumors were already swirling that Nova Dynamics leadership had been difficult to work with. Clara continued, her voice calm but deliberate. As of this morning, I've requested an internal audit of the merger terms. I want to make sure Langford Holdings' interests are fully protected. Mr. Harlan nodded slowly. Understood. That's quite wise. Thank you, she said simply. And as part of my transition plan, I'll also be visiting Nova Dynamics headquarters this week to review joint operations personally. Richard gave her a knowing glance. He understood exactly what she meant. She was going to face Daniel. 2 days later, Clara found herself standing in the lobby of Nova Dynamics Tower. The building loomed above her, a monument of glass and steel that seemed designed to intimidate. The receptionist, a young woman with sleek hair and bright red lipstick, looked up with a practiced smile. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" "Yes," Clara replied smoothly. "Clara Benson. I'm here to meet with the executive management team regarding the merger." The woman's fingers paused over the keyboard for a moment before her eyes widened slightly. "Of course, Mrs. Benson. They're expecting you. Top floor." The elevator ride felt endless. Clara could see her reflection in the mirrored walls. Composed, confident, unreadable. Inside, though, her heart thudded against her ribs. She hadn't seen Daniel since the morning of their argument. He hadn't called, hadn't texted. Perhaps he assumed she was still home, defeated. The elevator chimed softly, and the doors slid open. The top floor was immaculate. Sleek desks, hushed conversations, the faint scent of coffee and ambition. A secretary led her to the boardroom, where several executives were already seated. At the far end of the table sat Daniel Benson, flipping through documents. He didn't look up immediately. "Good morning," Clara said evenly as she entered. Daniel's head jerked up. For a second he froze, his expression a mix of disbelief and confusion. "Clara." The executives turned their heads toward him, puzzled. "Yes," she replied calmly, taking a seat opposite him. "Mrs. Benson. Representing Langford Holdings." He blinked rapidly, his face paling slightly. What are you doing here?" "I believe this meeting concerns the ongoing merger between our companies," she said smoothly. "As the new majority shareholder of Langford Holdings, I'll be overseeing all joint operations moving forward." The silence that followed was almost theatrical. One of the other executives, trying to diffuse the tension, cleared his throat. "Ah, wonderful. We were just reviewing the quarterly integration reports. Mrs. Benson, we're honored to have you here." Clara smiled politely. "Thank you. Please continue." As the discussion unfolded, Clara listened intently, occasionally interjecting with sharp, well-informed questions. She had studied the documents thoroughly, and her observations were precise. The executives quickly realized that she wasn't just a symbolic owner. She understood the details. Daniel, however, sat in stunned silence for most of the meeting, occasionally glancing at her as though trying to comprehend what he was seeing. When the meeting concluded, he caught up to her by the elevator. "Clara, wait." She turned, her expression neutral. "Yes. What the hell is going on?" he demanded, lowering his voice. "How are you involved in this? You're not. You can't be serious." "I'm very serious," she said, meeting his gaze. "When my uncle passed away, he left me everything, including Langford Holdings. So, technically, I'm your company's largest partner now." Daniel's jaw clenched. "This is insane. You can't run a corporation. You don't know what you're doing." Clara's voice was quiet but sharp. "Maybe not yet. But I can learn. And you'll be seeing a lot more of me in the coming weeks, so I suggest you get used to it." She turned to leave, but he caught her wrist gently, his tone softening. "Clara, listen. I didn't mean what I said that morning. I was frustrated and..." She pulled her hand free. "You meant every word, Daniel. And I'm not here to discuss our marriage. This is business now." Her eyes, once timid, were calm and cold. Daniel stood there, speechless, as she walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor, echoing like a declaration of independence. That night, Clara sat by her apartment window, staring out at Valoria's city lights. The skyline shimmered like a constellation of promises. She thought about how far she'd come in just 2 weeks. From the woman who had trembled under her husband's insults to one who now commanded boardrooms. But beneath the calm surface, a storm brewed. She knew Daniel wouldn't take this humiliation quietly. She could almost feel the tension building, the reckoning that was bound to come. Still, as she sipped her tea and looked out into the night, A small smile tugged at her lips. "Let him rage," she murmured. "I'm just getting started." The city hummed below her, unaware that a quiet revolution had begun, not in the streets, but in the heart of a woman who refused to be broken. The next morning, Daniel Benson sat in his office at Nova Dynamics Tower. His thoughts tangled in disbelief. He hadn't slept much since yesterday's meeting. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Clara sitting across from him in that boardroom. Confident, composed, and entirely out of his control. Clara, who once made him coffee and waited for him to come home. Clara, who apologized when he raised his voice. Clara, who he had dismissed as weak. Now she was his company's most powerful partner. He rubbed his temples, his frustration simmering. Around him, the office buzzed with normalcy. Phones ringing, printers whirring, but Daniel's world had shifted overnight. His colleague Evan, a tall man with sharp features and an unfiltered mouth, strolled into his office holding 2 cups of coffee. "You look like someone hit you with a merger agreement." Daniel glared at him. "It's not funny." Evan handed him a cup. "Relax, man. What's got you wound up this early?" Daniel hesitated, unsure how to explain. "You know the new owner of Langford Holdings?" "Yeah, that mysterious Mrs. Benson who came in for the audit meeting." Evan grinned. "She's a shark. Everyone's been talking about her." Daniel's jaw tightened. "She's my wife." The coffee nearly spilled from Evan's hand. "Wait, what?" "My wife," Daniel repeated. His tone edged with irritation. We're not exactly on good terms." Evan whistled softly. "Man, that's rough. So she's your boss now. That's some poetic justice." Daniel shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "It's not justice. Kiss. She's completely out of her depth." But even as he said it, his voice lacked conviction. Because deep down, Daniel had seen something in her eyes during that meeting. Control. It unnerved him. Meanwhile, across the city, Clara Benson walked through the halls of Langford Holdings with quiet authority. Her heels clicked against the marble floors as she greeted staff and reviewed reports with her new assistant, Lena, a bright young woman with quick wit and sharp instincts. "Your afternoon schedule includes a meeting with Nova Dynamics operations team," Lena said, flipping through her tablet. "They sent over new projections for the merged logistics department." "Good," Clara replied. "Make sure all financial data aligns with our internal audit. I don't want any discrepancies." Lena smiled. "Already on it, ma'am." Clara appreciated her efficiency. It reminded her of herself. Focused, meticulous, determined. Over the past week, she had immersed herself in corporate learning. She read through legal documents, studied leadership strategies, and even hired a discreet financial advisor to help her strengthen Langford's portfolio. But while she was building her empire, whispers about her personal life began to spread. One morning, Clara overheard 2 junior employees chatting by the elevator. "They say Mrs. Benson's husband works for Nova Dynamics," one said in a hushed voice. "Yeah, I heard he was her subordinate after the merger." Imagine how awkward that must be. Clara stepped into the elevator before they could notice her. She didn't scold them. Gossip was part of office life, but their words lingered. It wasn't embarrassment that bothered her. It was how predictable people could be. They only saw drama, not transformation. She wasn't a vengeful woman by nature. But Daniel had humiliated her publicly and privately. And now she had the chance to show him, and everyone else, what true power looked like. Later that afternoon, Clara arrived at Nova Dynamics for the follow-up meeting. This time, the atmosphere in the boardroom was noticeably different. The executives were more attentive, more cautious. Daniel sat at the far end, his posture rigid. "Mrs. Benson," said CEO Walter Crane, a man in his 60s with silver hair and a politician's charm. "We appreciate your thorough review of our operations. I understand you've identified some concerns." Clara nodded. "Yes. I've noticed certain discrepancies in the projected logistics costs since the merger. It appears that Nova Dynamics side has overreported integration expenses by nearly $500,000. The room fell silent. Walter frowned. That's a serious claim. Daniel shifted in his seat. With respect, those numbers came directly from our operations division. There may be a misunderstanding. Clara met his gaze evenly. Then perhaps you'd like to explain it. Daniel hesitated, his confidence wavering under her calm scrutiny. She slid a folder across the table. These are the internal reports from your division and ours. Notice the difference in the transportation cost columns. One set of figures has been adjusted upward without documentation. Walter's expression hardened as he glanced through the papers. Daniel, is this accurate? Daniel swallowed. I'll have to review with the accounting team, sir. It's probably an oversight. Clara leaned back slightly, her voice soft but firm. Of course. I'll expect a full clarification report by the end of the week. Walter nodded approvingly. Mrs. Benson, your attention to detail is impressive. We value partners who hold us accountable. Daniel's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. After the meeting, Clara packed her documents calmly while Daniel approached her. You didn't have to embarrass me in front of everyone, he muttered. I didn't embarrass you, she replied, slipping the folder into her bag. The numbers did. Clara, I told you I'd fix it. And I'm sure you will, she said coolly. Because this is your job now, isn't it? He stared at her, his pride splintering. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Clara turned to face him. Do you think I'm enjoying having to clean up after people who thought I wasn't good enough to be here? Her tone wasn't angry. It was precise like a scalpel. Daniel's shoulders sagged. For the first time he looked small. Clara, he said quietly, I didn't mean to hurt you back then. I was just insecure. She interrupted softly. Yes, I know. She picked up her briefcase and walked away, leaving him speechless once again. That evening, Clara returned home to find her apartment filled with flowers. The scent of lilies and roses enveloped her as she stepped inside. A note lay on the dining table. Clara, I was wrong. About everything. Miss you. Please let's talk. Daniel. She stared at the note for a long time, her emotions tangled. Once, that message would have broken her resolve. Now, it only reminded her how much she'd grown. She didn't hate Daniel anymore. She pitied him. She picked up her phone, typed a short reply, then deleted it. Instead, she opened her laptop and dove back into her work. Forgiveness would come later, on her terms. For now, she had a company to run, a reputation to build, and a legacy to honor. Outside her window, the neon lights of Valoria painted the night in shades of ambition and defiance. The woman Daniel had once underestimated was no longer waiting for validation. She was creating her own destiny, one decisive move at a time. And deep down Clara knew. The real unraveling had just begun. The rain fell steadily over Valoria, painting silver trails across the high-rise windows. In her office, Clara Benson stood by the glass wall overlooking the city, her reflection merging with the storm beyond. She had just wrapped up a conference call with the Langford Holdings legal team. Her days had become a blur of board meetings, audits, and strategy sessions. Every step she took carried weight now. Every decision echoed through two companies. Yet beneath her calm exterior, she felt the strain tightening like invisible wire. The power she had gained came with demands she had never anticipated. People looked to her for direction. Investors called her name in meetings. Employees watched her every move. And Daniel, he had begun to fight back. 2 days earlier, he had submitted a revised financial plan to the Nova Dynamics board, quietly trying to shift budget authority away from Langford's oversight. It was a bold move, almost reckless. Clara had discovered it within hours, thanks to Lena's diligence. Now, the corporate world was becoming a chessboard, and her husband, her former tormentor, was positioning himself as her rival. Lena entered the office carrying a folder. Here's the update from Nova Dynamics Logistics Division, ma'am, she said. And there's also a personal message from Mr. Benson. He sent it through the internal network. Clara raised an eyebrow. A message? Yes. Do you want me to delete it? Clara hesitated. No. Forward it to me. When Lena left, Clara sat at her desk and opened the email. Clara, I'm not trying to fight you, but you're making this impossible. You're undermining me in front of everyone. If you keep this up, we'll both crash. Please stop turning this into a war. Daniel. She read the message twice. It was almost civil, yet something about it stung more than his insults ever had. Because now he was asking for mercy. Clara closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. She didn't want war. But she couldn't surrender her dignity, not after what she'd been through. A knock came at the door. Richard Lang stepped in, his expression thoughtful. You look exhausted, he said. Clara gave a faint smile. I'm fine. Just adjusting. He took a seat opposite her. You've done remarkably well, Clara. But you need to pace yourself. Power is intoxicating and dangerous when mixed with emotion. She looked at him, puzzled. You think I'm being emotional? I think you're human, Richard said gently. Daniel is pushing back, yes, but your responses must always be professional. If this becomes personal, the board will sense it. She nodded slowly. I understand. Good, he said, standing. Because the next board meeting will be crucial. The Nova Dynamics directors are growing uneasy. They don't like the idea of a merger partner holding moral authority over them. You'll need to be composed. I will be, she said firmly. After he left, Clara turned toward the window again. The rain had intensified, drumming a restless rhythm against the glass. For a brief moment she let her guard drop. Her mind wandered to the early days of her marriage, when Daniel had been kind, when laughter had filled their small apartment. She had believed in him then, believed in love. But love without respect was a prison, and she had escaped it. Now she had to protect what she had built. Across town, Daniel sat at a dimly lit bar, nursing a glass of whiskey. His friend Evan slid into the seat beside him. You look like hell, Evan said. Daniel gave a humorless chuckle. Thanks for the observation. Evan leaned back. So what's the plan? Everyone at work's talking about this power struggle between you and your wife. Daniel scowled. Ex-wife soon enough. And there's no power struggle. She's just playing games. Games? Evan laughed. From what I've seen, she's winning. Daniel's glare could have cut steel. She's lucky. That's all. She inherited money, not skill. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. Clara had impressed the entire board with her composure. He'd seen the way executives leaned in when she spoke, how they respected her opinion. And that infuriated him. He had always been the ambitious one, the driven one. He'd clawed his way up from nothing. Clara was supposed to be the quiet wife who supported him, not the woman who eclipsed him. Evan sipped his drink. Be careful, man. If you try to fight her, it'll backfire. She's got the upper hand now. Daniel stared at his glass. Maybe. But I know her. She's too emotional for this world. She'll break eventually. Evan shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe she already did. And what's left doesn't break anymore. Daniel didn't respond. The thought unsettled him. 2 days later, the quarterly board meeting began. The long conference room buzzed with quiet tension. Executives from both companies sat on either side of the polished table, screens glowing with data projections. Clara arrived precisely on time, wearing a navy suit that projected quiet authority. Daniel was already there, flipping through his notes. Walter Crane, the Nova Dynamics CEO, called the meeting to order. Let's begin. Today we'll review integration progress and address concerns raised by Mrs. Benson regarding financial transparency. Daniel's tone was sharp as he spoke. With respect, I believe Langford Holdings is overstepping its oversight role. We are equal partners in this merger. Clara folded her hands. Equal partners, yes. but equal accountability too. If your side reports inflated expenses, it becomes our concern. Walter looked between them, sensing the growing tension. Let's stay focused, please. The meeting dragged on, filled with numbers and negotiations. But under the surface, it was a duel. Each time Daniel tried to assert control, Clara countered with calm precision. She questioned figures, clarified strategies, and gently redirected discussions until the room naturally turned toward her. By the end, even Walter nodded approvingly. Excellent work, Mrs. Benson. Your insights have been invaluable. As the meeting adjourned, Daniel remained seated, his knuckles white against the table. When everyone else had left, he turned to her. You humiliated me again. Clara stood, her voice steady. No, Daniel. I did my job. You think you're better than me now? She looked at him sadly. No. I think I finally see who I am, and that's something you never allowed me to be. He laughed bitterly. So this is revenge. It's growth, she said simply. And if you can't handle that, it's not my fault. Without another word, she walked out, leaving him alone in the sterile silence of the boardroom. That night, Clara returned home to find a storm raging outside. Lightning flashed over Valoria's skyline, thunder rolling like a heartbeat. She poured herself a glass of wine and stood by the window, watching the storm tear across the city. Felt fitting. Her life was a storm now, loud, unpredictable, and full of power she could barely control. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid. But she also knew storms could destroy as easily as they transformed. And somewhere in the distance, Daniel was plotting his next move. The storm inside and outside had only just begun. The morning sun broke through the lingering storm clouds, casting golden light across Valoria. But inside Nova Dynamics Tower, the atmosphere was anything but bright. Rumors swirled through the upper floors like wildfire. Someone had leaked internal documents revealing cost discrepancies, and the Langford Holdings audit team was now under intense scrutiny. Clara Benson arrived early, her calm expression concealing the unease tightening in her chest. She had received an anonymous message overnight. A simple warning. Watch your back. Someone close to you isn't who they seem. She didn't know whether to take it seriously, but her instincts told her she should. The timing was too precise. Her assistant, Lena, rushed in carrying a folder. Mrs. Benson, there's trouble. Nova Dynamics' financial department has accused Langford of mismanaging integration funds. Clara frowned. That's absurd. We've been transparent with every report. I know, Lena said breathlessly, but they've already taken it to the board. Daniel Benson submitted a formal complaint against your department this morning. Clara froze. Daniel? Yes. He's claiming that Langford has been manipulating the figures to make Nova Dynamics look unstable. Clara sank slowly into her chair, her heartbeat loud in her ears. She had expected Daniel to resist her authority, but not this. He's crossing a line, she said quietly. Gather all documentation related to our expense reports. Every spreadsheet, every email. Lena nodded and hurried out. For a moment, Clara just sat there, staring at the city skyline. Daniel was making his countermove. And this one could damage everything she had built. Meanwhile, in another corner of the building, Daniel leaned back in his chair, feeling a rare sense of control. He had spent the entire night orchestrating his plan. With help from a sympathetic Nova Dynamics accountant, he had restructured several old expense reports to make it appear as though Langford's department had misfiled certain payments. It was a risky move, technically unethical, maybe even illegal, but he told himself it was necessary. Clara had humiliated him in front of their colleagues, undermined his authority, and reduced him to an afterthought. This was his chance to remind her that he wasn't a man to be dismissed. Evan appeared at his door, looking uneasy. You really went through with it. Daniel smirked. It's not sabotage. It's balance. She's been controlling the narrative, and now it's time she faces pressure too. Evan shook his head. Daniel, this could destroy both of you if it blows up. It won't, Daniel said confidently. She's good, but she's not perfect. I just need her to slip once. One mistake, and I'll take back everything she took from me. Evan sighed, realizing there was no reasoning with him. You're playing a dangerous game. Daniel smiled faintly. Games are what I do best. Later that afternoon, the emergency board meeting began. The room was filled with tension. Walter Crane sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. We're here to address a serious matter regarding alleged financial misconduct within Langford Holdings' audit team, he began. Clara entered the room with her usual poise, carrying a folder filled with documents. Daniel sat across from her, his expression deceptively calm. Walter turned to Daniel. Mr. Benson, you raised this issue. Present your case. Daniel stood, flipping through a few pages of printed data. Over the past 2 months, Langford's audit department has adjusted several cost entries tied to the merger's integration phase. These adjustments resulted in inflated profits on their end and operational shortfalls on ours. He placed the papers in front of Walter. The evidence is all here. Clara waited patiently before speaking. May I? Walter nodded. She took the documents, scanning them carefully. Then she looked up. This data is doctored. Murmurs rippled through the room. Explain, Walter demanded. These figures have been manipulated. The timestamps on the document metadata show alterations from last night, well after our reporting deadline. Daniel frowned. Are you accusing me of falsifying evidence? Clara met his eyes. I'm saying the numbers don't lie, but people do. The tension thickened like fog. Walter cleared his throat. We'll have the IT department verify both sets of reports. Until then, I suggest we all remain professional. The meeting adjourned in uneasy silence. Back in her office, Clara's anger finally cracked through her composure. She paced the room, every step echoing off the polished floor. Lena entered, hesitant. I've checked our internal logs. Someone accessed our finance drive last night using an old Nova Dynamics login. Daniels. Clara stopped pacing. Are you certain? Lena nodded. 100%. I can pull the security timestamp. Clara closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. Do it. Quietly. If he wants a war, we'll fight by the rules. As Lena left, Clara sank into her chair. She felt the sting of betrayal cut deeper than she expected. For all their differences, she had still believed that somewhere inside him, there was decency. But now, Daniel wasn't just her ex-husband. He was her enemy. That evening, Daniel arrived home to find a subpoena waiting on his doorstep. He tore it open, scanning the legal language. His heart sank. Langford Holdings had filed an official complaint against him for corporate misconduct and breach of data integrity. He cursed under his breath. She wasn't wasting time. Moments later, his phone buzzed. It was Clara. He answered sharply. Enjoying yourself. Her voice was calm but icy. This isn't a game, Daniel. You crossed a line. You tried to ruin me, and now you've exposed yourself. You think you're untouchable, he snapped. You think your money makes you righteous. No, she said quietly. My integrity does. He laughed bitterly. Don't preach to me, Clara. You wouldn't even be here if it weren't for that inheritance. You're a rich woman playing business. Clara's tone hardened. Maybe. But at least I built something real with it. What have you built, Daniel, besides your ego? There was silence. Then she added softly. This could have been peace between us. You chose war. Don't expect mercy. The line went dead. Daniel stood in the doorway, gripping the phone until his knuckles whitened. The walls of his apartment felt smaller than ever. For the first time he realized he might have gone too far. The next morning the results of the IT audit came in. The data confirmed that the Nova Dynamics reports had been altered using Daniel Benson's login credentials. The board suspended him pending investigation. He was escorted out of the building before noon. Clara watched from her office window as security led him to the elevator. There was no triumph in her eyes, only quiet sorrow. Lena stepped beside her. "You did the right thing, ma'am." "Maybe," Clara said softly. "But sometimes the right thing still hurts." She turned away from the window. Her empire was safe for now. But the cost of victory was loneliness, a silence that no success could fill. For the first time since she had inherited Langford Holdings, Clara Benson felt the weight of power in its truest form. Heavy, isolating, and irreversible. And deep down, she knew Daniel wasn't finished. Because pride, once wounded, doesn't die quietly. The story broke 3 days later. By noon, every major business outlet in Valoria was running the same headline. Corporate scandal rocks Nova Dynamics. Senior executive suspended for data manipulation. The article detailed everything: the falsified reports, the breach of data integrity, and the temporary suspension of Daniel Benson pending further investigation. His photograph, taken from a company event months earlier, sat beside the story. At Langford Holdings, Clara read the article in silence. Her office phone buzzed non-stop with calls from investors and journalists. Her assistant, Lena, managed them efficiently, but even she looked worried. "Do you want me to release a statement, ma'am?" Lena asked gently. Clara shook her head. "Not yet. The more we say, the more the press will twist it. Let Nova Dynamics handle the narrative for now." Lena nodded, but her concern lingered. "They're calling you the whistleblower. Some are saying you leaked the data yourself." Clara exhaled. "Let them talk. The truth doesn't need defending. It only needs time." She turned her chair toward the window, gazing out over the skyline. The city below pulsed with its usual rhythm, unaware that her entire world had shifted. Victory should have felt sweet. Instead, it tasted like ash. Across town, Daniel's apartment was a mess of half-empty bottles, unopened mail, and crumpled newspapers. He sat on the couch, staring blankly at the television where a news anchor was dissecting his downfall. Sources within Nova Dynamics suggest that Daniel Benson, formerly director of operations, may face a permanent ban from holding executive positions pending regulatory review. Daniel's phone buzzed again. Another missed call from Evan. He ignored it. He couldn't face anyone. Not after the humiliation. His entire career had been built on confidence and charm. Now, he couldn't walk into a restaurant without seeing his name on a headline. He picked up one of the papers from the coffee table and tore it in half. "They don't know anything," he muttered bitterly. "She set me up." But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. He had done this to himself. The lies, the falsified data, it had all been his choice. And yet, part of him still couldn't accept that Clara had beaten him. He slammed his fist against the armrest. "She thinks she's better than me," he whispered. "She thinks this is over." He stood abruptly, pacing the room. It's not over. At Langford Holdings, the company's boardroom was alive with energy. Executives and shareholders praised Clara for her integrity and composure during the scandal. "Your decision to bring the matter forward saved both companies from severe reputational damage," said Richard Lang, her mentor and the late founder's cousin. "You've proven yourself beyond question." Clara smiled politely, but her thoughts were elsewhere. After the meeting, Richard lingered behind. "You've done remarkably well," he said, studying her. "But I have to ask, how are you really holding up?" Clara hesitated. "I'm fine. Just tired." He nodded knowingly. "Power tests the soul, Clara. The higher you rise, the lonelier it becomes. Don't lose the part of yourself that made you strong in the first place." "I won't," she promised softly. But that night, when she returned home to her quiet apartment, she realized how hollow success could feel. The silence pressed in around her. She had proven herself capable, even unstoppable, but in the process, she had lost the last fragments of the life she once knew. 2 weeks later, Clara attended a charity gala at the Valoria Grand Hotel, hosted by the city's Chamber of Commerce. It was her first public appearance since the scandal. She wore a simple black gown, elegant yet understated. Cameras flashed as she entered, and reporters called her name, asking about the Nova Dynamics fallout. She smiled gracefully but said nothing. Inside, she mingled with investors and community leaders, offering polite conversation and genuine interest. Her reputation had shifted from the mysterious heiress to the formidable businesswoman. Halfway through the evening, she spotted a familiar face near the bar. Daniel. He looked thinner, older somehow, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. The once confident man who had commanded boardrooms now stood on the fringes of the event, ignored by most. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment the noise faded. He hesitated, then approached her slowly. Clara. Daniel. Her tone was neutral, her expression unreadable. I didn't expect to see you here, he said quietly. This is a business event, she replied. Not a battlefield. He gave a dry laugh. That's never stopped us before. Clara tilted her head slightly. Why are you here, Daniel? To apologize or to start another fight? He looked down, shame flickering across his face. I came to tell you that they fired me. Permanently. My career is over. I know, she said softly. It didn't have to end that way. He nodded slowly. I know. I thought if I could just prove you weren't as strong as everyone thought, maybe I could feel like myself again. But I was wrong. She studied him for a moment. There was no arrogance in his voice this time. Only regret. I never wanted revenge, she said. Only respect. And you earned it, he admitted. You always did. I just couldn't see it. Clara exhaled, her shoulders relaxing for the first time that night. We both made mistakes, Daniel. Maybe it's time we stop punishing each other for them. He looked at her, eyes glistening. You can forgive me. I can, she said. But I can't forget. He nodded. That's fair. They stood in silence for a long moment before he turned to leave. Goodbye, Clara, he said softly. Goodbye, Daniel. As he walked away, Clara felt an unexpected sense of peace. For the first time since her inheritance, she wasn't defined by anger or ambition. She was simply herself, a woman who had survived and learned. Later that night, as she drove home through the city lights, Clara thought about everything she had endured. The insults, the betrayal, the war for control. It had cost her dearly, but it had also revealed her strength. And though she had forgiven Daniel, she knew this wasn't the end of her journey. It was only the beginning of something greater. The storm had passed, but the rebuilding of her life, her company, and her heart was just beginning. 3 months had passed since the Nova Dynamics scandal shook the business world of Valoria. The city had moved on to new headlines, new stories, and new scandals. But for Clara Benson, life had taken on a quieter, steadier rhythm. The chaos was gone. In its place was clarity. Langford Holdings had not only recovered from the corporate storm, it had flourished. Investors who had once doubted her were now lining up to be part of her next initiative. Project Horizon, a long-term sustainability venture aimed at building renewable infrastructure across the city. Clara had poured herself into the project. It wasn't just business, it was a statement. Proof that success could come from integrity, not manipulation or greed. In the sleek boardroom on the top floor of Langford Tower, she reviewed the proposal with her executive team. Charts and graphs filled the wall screen, outlining growth projections and community benefits. This isn't just about profit, Clara said, addressing the room. It's about rebuilding trust in our company and in what business leadership can mean. Langford Holdings will invest $10 million into this project, and will partner with local developers to ensure it benefits Valoria's people first. Her team nodded, inspired. Even the most skeptical among them had come to admire her direct, grounded leadership. When the meeting adjourned, Lena entered with a stack of documents. That went perfectly, ma'am. The board unanimously approved the budget. Clara smiled. Good work, Lena. We're finally turning a page. Lena hesitated before adding, "There's also someone waiting to see you. He says he's an investor, a Mr. Caleb Ward." The name struck Clara faintly. Caleb Ward. Yes. He said he knew Richard Lang personally and wanted to discuss a partnership proposal. "Send him in," Clara said, intrigued. Moments later, a man in his late 30s entered the room. He was dressed neatly but without pretension. A charcoal suit, no tie, a quiet confidence in his stride. "Mrs. Benson," he greeted with a warm smile. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Richard spoke highly of you before he retired." Clara gestured for him to sit. "And you are?" "Caleb Ward. I run a firm called Meridian Ventures. We specialize in sustainable investments. I've been following your work with Project Horizon. I believe we could help you take it global." Clara studied him carefully. His tone was calm, his words deliberate. There was something different about him, not the usual slick charm of businesspeople, but genuine conviction. "I'm listening," she said. Caleb outlined his proposal, explaining how Meridian Ventures could provide additional funding and connect Langford Holdings with international partners. His vision aligned perfectly with hers. When he finished, Clara leaned back thoughtfully. "You seem sincere, Mr. Ward. And I appreciate that. But I have one question: why Langford? There are plenty of firms you could partner with." He smiled faintly. "Because you don't just build companies. You rebuild people's faith in them. And that's the kind of legacy I want to invest in." Clara felt an unexpected warmth in her chest. It had been a long time since anyone spoke to her with such respect, without ulterior motives. "I'll review your proposal," she said, smiling. "But I think we may be on the same path." As Caleb left, Lena peeked into the office, grinning. "He seems different." Clara laughed softly. "He does. Maybe that's a good thing." A few days later, Clara attended the official launch of Project Horizon. The event was held in Valoria's Central Plaza, with a small stage, banners, and a crowd of reporters. She stood at the podium, her voice clear and confident as she addressed the audience. "When we first began this journey, it wasn't about redemption or revenge," she said. "It was about rediscovering purpose. Langford Holdings has faced storms, both external and within. But storms don't destroy strength, they reveal it." Applause rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed, capturing the image of a woman who had rebuilt not just a company, but her own identity. After the event, Caleb approached her. "You were incredible," he said. "You've got a leader's voice, firm but human." "Thank you," she replied, smiling. "That means a lot." He looked at her thoughtfully. "If you ever decide to expand Project Horizon beyond Valoria, Meridian Ventures will stand with you." "I'll hold you to that," Clara said. They shook hands, a gesture that felt more like a beginning than a deal. That evening, back in her penthouse, Clara sat on the balcony overlooking the glowing city. The air was cool, the skyline alive with lights. She poured herself a cup of tea and opened her journal, something she hadn't touched in months. Her handwriting flowed steadily across the page. "Success doesn't erase pain. It refines it. The past doesn't vanish. It teaches. And forgiveness. It's not for them, it's for me." She closed the journal and looked up at the stars. Valoria shimmered with energy and possibility. She had once thought her future ended with betrayal, but now she saw it was only the beginning. A gentle knock came at her door. It was Lena, holding a folder. "Sorry to disturb you, ma'am, but I thought you should see this." Clara opened the folder and found a newspaper clipping. "Disgraced executive Daniel Benson opens new consulting firm for startups." A small picture of Daniel accompanied the headline. He looked healthier, humbler perhaps. Clara smiled faintly. "Good for him," she said softly. "Maybe he's finally rebuilding too." Lena smiled. "Seems like everyone's finding their second chance." "Yes," Clara said, gazing out at the city again. "Even storms have silver linings." For the first time in a long while, Clara Benson felt peace. Not the fragile, temporary kind, but the deep-rooted peace that comes from knowing you've done your best, learned your lessons, and let go. The rebuilding had begun. And this time she wasn't doing it out of pain, she was doing it out of purpose. The following spring, Valoria was in full bloom. Trees lined the avenues in shades of pale pink and gold, and the city's harbor reflected the sunrise like a mirror of molten copper. From her office window on the top floor of Langford Tower, Clara Benson watched the scene unfold with a calm smile. A year ago, she had stood in the same spot burdened by betrayal and loss. Today, she stood renewed, not as a woman defined by what she had suffered, but by what she had built. Langford Holdings had just announced its most successful quarter in company history. Project Horizon had expanded beyond Valoria into 3 neighboring cities, creating thousands of jobs and earning global recognition for sustainable innovation. The boardroom was buzzing with reporters, investors, and media executives eager to interview the woman whose story had become legend, a woman who turned humiliation into purpose. But for Clara, numbers and headlines were no longer the measure of success. It was something simpler now, the peace she felt waking up each morning, knowing she had used her pain to build something lasting. Lena entered the office, her face glowing with excitement. "Congratulations, ma'am. The International Business Journal just named you Visionary Leader of the Year." Clara laughed gently. "Visionary leader, huh? I like the sound of that. They want you to deliver a keynote speech at the Global Women in Leadership Summit next month," Lena added. "You've inspired a lot of people." "That's unexpected," Clara said softly. "But maybe that's the kind of story worth sharing." That evening, Clara attended a small gathering hosted by the city's business council. The event was elegant but intimate. No flashing cameras, no long speeches. Just colleagues, friends, and the quiet hum of a jazz band in the background. She was mingling near the balcony when she heard a familiar voice. Enjoying the view. She turned to see Caleb Ward, dressed in a simple navy suit, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. "I should have known you'd show up," Clara said with a smile. "You seem to appear at the right moments." "Call it good timing," Caleb replied, handing her one of the glasses. "I heard about the award." "Congratulations, Clara. You earned it." "Thank you," she said warmly. "It still feels surreal sometimes, how far things have come." He studied her quietly. "You didn't just rebuild a company. You redefined what leadership can look like." Clara looked out over the glowing skyline of Valoria. Maybe that's what life's about, rebuilding without bitterness. Turning endings into beginnings. Caleb nodded. "That's what makes your story powerful. You chose forgiveness over vengeance." Clara smiled faintly. "It wasn't easy. But holding on to hate only keeps you tied to what broke you." He raised his glass. "To new beginnings, then." "To new beginnings," she echoed. They clinked glasses softly, a quiet celebration of survival and renewal. Weeks later, Clara stood before a global audience at the Leadership Summit. The hall was vast, filled with women and men from across the world. Executives, entrepreneurs, dreamers. She stepped up to the podium, confident but serene. "When I lost everything," she began, "I thought my life had ended. I was wrong. It had only begun." Her voice carried through the room, calm and strong. "I learned that strength isn't about pretending you're unbreakable. It's about rebuilding even when you've been shattered. It's about facing betrayal, heartbreak, and failure, and choosing to rise anyway. That's how legacies are born." The audience was silent, listening intently. "I was once told that I wasn't worthy of support," Clara continued. "That I was weak, lazy, and unlovable. But today, I stand before you not as proof of revenge, but as proof of redemption. Because our worth isn't determined by who walks away from us. It's defined by who we become after they do." Applause filled the room, long and heartfelt. Tears glimmered in Clara's eyes, but she smiled through them. "Build your legacy," she said softly. "Not from bitterness, but from belief. Not from anger, but from purpose. Because no one can take away a legacy built on truth. The standing ovation lasted minutes. Later that evening, Clara sat once more on her balcony, the same place she had sat in despair a year ago. But tonight, the stars felt closer, like companions rather than distant lights. She opened her journal, turning to the final page. I used to think strength meant never falling. Now I know it means rising even when no one expects you to. My story isn't about revenge. It's about rediscovery. And this piece, is my legacy. She closed the book gently. In the distance, fireworks lit up Valoria's skyline, marking the city's annual Founders' Festival. Clara watched the lights bloom and fade, a mirror of everything she had endured and overcome. Then her phone buzzed. A message from Caleb. Caleb. Congratulations again, Clara. Dinner tomorrow. I'd like to discuss a new project, and maybe something beyond business. Clara smiled, her heart light. Clara, I'd like that. She put her phone aside and leaned back, letting the sound of the city surround her. The wind was soft, the world alive, and her heart, finally free. Her legacy wasn't just in buildings, profits, or awards. It was in the strength to forgive, the courage to rebuild, and the grace to begin again. If you've reached the end of Clara's journey in I'm Not Going to Support a Fat Lazy Woman Like You, thank you for reading. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another story of resilience, redemption, and unexpected triumphs. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded. The end of one chapter can be the beginning of an even greater one.